Great. Hey, thank you, Beth. I'd like to start by welcoming everybody to today's webinar on strategic energy management. And I'd like to note that all of Portland General Electric's seminars and webinars are in part sponsored by the Energy Trust of Oregon and the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. We do work together to make sure that the concepts and recommendations that you learn in these events are consistent across all of the individual programs and services, and that you're fully aware of the resources that are available to you. So with that, I'd like to just start with today's objectives. We really have four basic objectives. The first is to get an overview of strategic energy management. The second is to share the learning of the process. So we're really looking for interactive exchange today. And then third is to understand the range of Portland General Electric trainings that can help you and your organization through the process of strategic energy management over time. And of course, to have fun along the way, feel free to ask questions. If you have jokes, you get extra points for those. But the real goal here is to get you to think strategically about energy management in your organization and the activities that can help your organization advance with strategic energy management. And really, how do you engage other people in your organization? So, I will say at the outset here, we've got quite a group put together on the webinar. We have a wide range of facility types, and we have a wide range of experience with energy management. So I'd like to introduce the worksheet that comes along with this webinar and was sent to you ahead of time. You'll notice that this worksheet really has five basic kind of categories. The first up at the top with the 3 lines is the management commitment. And then you'll see the boxes for the plan, do, check, and act. I like to think like Stephen Covey, think about the end in mind, consider the end in mind. I'd encourage you to kind of pull out this worksheet or maybe even kind of create a worksheet on your own if you don't have it handy with these 5 categories. And as we go through the webinar today, collect the ideas that you think would be useful in your organization. So, starting with sharing, I'm going to ask maybe 2 or 3 of you to raise your hand using the raise your hand icon that Beth talked about earlier over in the chat box. Let's see if anybody's willing to introduce themselves and tell us just briefly about your organization and what your role is in energy management. Who wants to introduce themselves?
You can also chat with me if you'd like to, and I can share with the group.
So we are looking for an interactive workshop today here. I'll tell you what, let's have you tell us a little bit about what you think strategic energy management is. And what I'd like you to do is to use one of your text tools in the upper left-hand corner of your screen to just write a couple of words or phrases that define strategic energy management. After you're done typing, make sure you click somewhere on the screen so that your text can be seen by everybody. So tell me what you think strategic energy management means. Just give me a couple of words or phrases. Again, once you type, you will have to click on the screen so that your words show up somewhere else. Continuous improvement, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about the connection between strategic energy management and continuous improvement. Yep, establishing a plan is another element, if you will, of strategic energy management. With any continuous improvement process, you have a feedback loop, which is really rechecking. And then a holistic approach, absolutely. The long-term plan for improvement, I like that. you know, this concept of being continuous? Absolutely. And then ongoing updates and upgrades. So the first two words that really popped up here were continuous improvement. And I'd like to kind of start with that. So strategic energy management really comes out of this concept of continuous improvement. And continuous improvement really started back in the 1940s with Edward Deming, who applied statistics to the concept of improving business practices. And it's that process that has allowed industry and business to improve in terms of safety, environmental improvement, product quality, and now those concepts are being applied to energy. And so that's really the outgrowth of strategic energy management. And if you're familiar with continuous improvement, you will recognize the connection between the strategic energy management process that we're going to talk about and continuous improvement in general. So strategic energy management, as I kind of define it, is a system of practices that create continuous improvement of energy use and cost. So, you know, that's a kind of a nice, concise definition, but it really doesn't get us to the specifics of what strategic energy management is and how we actually apply that definition to improvement in your facility. So, you know, strategic energy management really touches all aspects of business processes. You know, it touches the training and human resources. It touches capital planning. It touches, you know, the technical side of the business, establishing baselines. It touches accounting in terms of paying the bills and tracking your expenses, auditing, setting key performance indicators, the purchasing department. So the real question is, how do we take all of these disparate business activities and put it into a cohesive plan? And the way we do that is by using what's referred to as the Shewhart cycle. Some people call this the Deming cycle, but it really is the plan, do, check, act process. And so we take that process and apply it to strategic energy management. And you'll notice that this is exactly how the worksheet that we outlined is structured. We start with making a management commitment, which is at the center of the plan, do, check, act process, and then we kind of work our way around this circle. And you'll see that there is this feedback loop. As somebody typed in defining strategic energy management, there was this recheck process. So we're going to go through each of these 5 categories in order. And you'll notice that there is some crossover, some overlap, some activities that you could define in one of these categories that might show up in another category. So we recognize that to some degree where you put an activity is defined really by how you put your plan together or how you implement. And if you have questions about that, I'm more than happy to address those. So I think many of you have probably seen the Energy Star Challenge process. You'll notice that the process for Energy Star Challenge really mirrors the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. You can see that making a commitment is up at the top of the process instead of in the center, but then you know, creating an action plan, implementing the plan, evaluating progress, and then recognizing the achievements, reassessing, coming back, having that rechecking process, as somebody typed in. So I'd also point out that the ISO 50001 process follows this diagram as well, as does the Superior Energy Performance process that some of you may be familiar with. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to just raise your hand at any point. Beth and I will work together to make sure that we address your questions. Okay, so with that, I'd like to kind of get an idea about where you are currently at with your strategic energy management and what you think you should be doing. This, by typing in on this worksheet, it'll help us better kind of target the webinar to meet your specific needs. So again, use your text tool in the upper left-hand corner of your screen to write a couple of phrases that that tell us where you're currently at with strategic energy management, and tell us where you think you should be going. For those of you that are familiar with lean manufacturing, which is really another kind of form of continuous improvement processing, this is defining the current state and defining the future state. So somebody has teams going right now. Somebody has goals. Somebody has already set goals, which is, absolutely one part of strategic energy management. Somebody's got executive sponsorship going. We're going to talk a little bit about executive sponsorship here in just a couple of minutes. Yep, somebody's indicated that they need to get buy-in from the top, and we'll address that in executive sponsorship. Employee buy-in, this whole concept of employee buy-in is very critical, and we'll talk about how to get employee buy-in. We'll also talk a little bit about some of PGE's trainings that'll get you, that'll help you actually develop an employee engagement plan. Analyzing needs. Somebody's identified need. I think there might be a little typo there. Need to start. Yeah. Part of strategic energy management is just getting going and figuring out what kind of the next logical step is. Sometimes before having a whole comprehensive plan, it just helps to kind of get going. Yeah, restarting from years ago. I want to acknowledge that many organizations have had energy teams and energy programs in the past. Sometimes they kind of fall off to the wayside, and it's really about recreating that momentum. So you would not be the first organization to have had a strategic energy management activity at some point in the past and have to restart. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you all for going through that process with us. This slide was at the beginning of the webinar, and a number of you had indicated activities that you wanted us to kind of address during the webinar today, and we'll try and do that to the extent we can. One of the reasons this slide was at the beginning of the webinar is that I believe this is kind of the comprehensive slide. You could take this slide and go through kind of bullet point by bullet point and outline activities for each of these elements and come out with a relatively strong strategic energy management plan. So you'll see that the bullet points in the middle of the page there really address the management commitment element. The bullet points to the right of that address establishing a plan, defining the current state, setting a baseline, setting goals, and having an action plan. Underneath that, the training, communication, et cetera, down through procurement is really the do section. And then off to the left of the page, you'll see that the monitoring, measuring through corrective actions is the check activity in strategic energy management. And then, of course, last but not least, we have the ACT section, which is that management review, technical review, recognizing and rewarding employees or others in your organization. It could even be folks that are external to your organization. And then updating the plan and having the cycle kind of start over again. So that's the process that we're going to go through. A number of you, or at least a couple of you, identified executive sponsor or getting top management commitment. You know, of these 5 items on the page here, I would say getting your executive sponsor on board is absolutely critical. And what do I mean by executive sponsor? I define the executive sponsor as somebody that can actually assign the resources necessary for you to be successful in your plan. So it's really, the executive sponsor is somebody that's going to help you outline the resources and assign the responsibilities. Some organizations need to have a policy. I've worked with a number of other organizations that have said, we're not a policy-driven organization, and we don't really need that. But you know, this concept of executive sponsorship is critical. I'd say a couple of things about that. The first is that as you go to engage your executive sponsor, I would recommend having an outline of specific activities that you are asking the executive sponsor to do in terms of strategic energy management. The second thing I'd say is that I would ask the executive sponsor how they define success, and I'd write that down and then use that definition of success to help structure your overall plan. You know, what is the executive sponsor looking for? Is it qualitative aspects about strategic energy management, or is it quantitative? Do they define success strictly as reducing energy costs by X%, or do they define success in terms of the number of employees that are involved in the activity? So again, I would be very clear about how the executive sponsor defines success and make sure that your energy management plan drives to that. The third thing I'd say about executive sponsor engagement, and this kind of falls back into the ACT section, is I would set a meeting 6 months and 12 months out with the executive sponsor and have those meetings on the calendar and drive the plan and the strategic energy management activities to having kind of a successful check-in with the executive sponsor at the 6-month and 12-month mark. Again, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make, please click on the raise hand button, and we're more than happy to address those. Any questions about making a management commitment? Okay, without further ado, Portland General Electric offers a handful of classes that I think really get to this management commitment concept. The first is a CFO's perspective on energy efficiency and renewables. And you know, while this class is really titled a CFO's perspective, I would say it is really the C-suite's perspective on energy efficiency and renewables. And if you are looking to kind of spark the interest of senior management in your organization, this is a class that senior management can go to and actually kind of rub shoulders with or exchange ideas with other executives that are thinking about energy efficiency and renewables. We ran a workshop last month or so, and one participant indicated that their senior management went to this class, and what they found was there were a number of other companies in the area that were ahead of their company in terms of energy efficiency and renewables, and it kind of sparked a competitive fire in their senior management to actually get going on activities. So I strongly recommend, if you're trying to engage senior management, this is a great class. The other 2 workshops here, Employee Engagement in Energy Efficiency and the Energy Champions Workshop, are 2 places where you can you will, well, with the employee engagement workshop, you will outline an employee engagement plan which includes identifying very specific activities that you want your senior management to take on. And similarly with the Energy Champions workshop. So if engaging senior management is a challenge, these are 3 training classes that we would recommend. So now I'd also like to say that you will be sent a list of all the training classes that PGE has, along with the dates and locations, and I believe a hyperlink to be able to register for those as well. So, and you'll notice that Beth is typing in the chat window when these classes are being offered. So you'll be able to kind of sign up for those. Okay, if there are any questions about management commitment, again, please raise your hand. The next step in the Shewhart cycle is to establish a plan. And really, the plan should define the current state. So where are you currently at? It should help you kind of identify where your baseline is. What are the key performance indicators that you're trying to improve? What are the goals that you have for your organization? And I would encourage you to write the goals as specifically as possible. You know, with any continuous improvement process, it is not a single person that is going to improve the organization, but you have to get the whole organization involved. And most organizations do that through a team, and of course the action plan pulls all of this information together. So I think somebody had mentioned establishing a baseline as one of the things that they wanted to talk about. The point that I would make about establishing a baseline is that obviously it has to be tailored very specifically for your organization. If you're a small commercial building, you know, basically looking at 2 or 3 years of historical energy consumption to get an idea of what a typical year's consumption looks like on a month-by-month basis, you can do that with your utility bills. If you are a large manufacturing process, then we actually recommend looking at your energy consumption either on a daily or a weekly basis and establishing some way to normalize your energy consumption based on either weather or production. And you know, that's a different kind of a process. So establishing a baseline really has to be tailored. The process of establishing a baseline really has to be tailored to your organization. I guess I'm curious, does anybody have a plan, a strategic energy management plan right now that they want to share with the rest of the group? So again, you can click on raise your hand to share.
Mark, I'd also like to remind people that you can, if you'd prefer, you can just chat with me and I'll share it with the group.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Beth. So I guess without hearing from anybody that has a plan, I'd like to point out a tool that can really be very, very useful to help you just with the initial stages of strategic energy management. So the EPA Energy Star program has come out with a facility energy management assessment matrix that you see here. So the way this energy management assessment matrix works is you go row by row down through each of these categories. So you can see, let's just take the first one, a site energy leader. You select which column best represents your organization. So if you do not have a site energy leader assigned, you would click on that box. If you've assigned a site energy leader, but not really empowered them, or a small fraction of their time is devoted to energy, or they're really not kind of empowered, then you would click on the middle box. If you have recognized a site energy leader and they're an empowered leader and they have senior management support, then you would click on that last box in that row. The main point here, though, is that as you go through this worksheet row by row, you should be thinking of ways to improve. And the last column, that next steps column, is a place for you to really capture ideas and action items to improve your energy management process over time. So Beth is going to be sending out this worksheet to everybody after the webinar. And I'd strongly recommend, if you have not used this, I strongly recommend going through this process. I'd also say that it is useful to do with your energy team or your executive sponsor. You know, it's a really useful tool to actually facilitate a discussion with your organization about where you're currently at. Again, you know, this is really helping you define the current state, but also what are the activities necessary to kind of get you to your ideal future state as well. I'm curious if anybody has used this worksheet and wants to tell us some of the things that have come out of it. You can click on raise your hand to share. All right, so the training workshops that Portland General Electric offers in terms related to kind of the establishing a plan section of the Shewhart cycle, again, there's the Energy Champions workshop. The Energy Champions workshop is really intended for the energy managers or energy champions. It's a 4-hour workshop, and the whole point is that you leave that workshop with a more detailed energy management plan. The employee engagement workshop, similar process. It's a 4-hour workshop, and the outcome of that workshop is you have an employee engagement plan specific to your facility. Both of those workshops, you get to engage with other people that are going through the same process as you, and there's a fair amount of sharing that happens. Another course is Calculating Energy Costs webinar, and then the fundamentals of energy and managing costs. So the other point that I'd make about these training courses is that think about these training courses not just for yourself, but others in your organization that you want to engage and enroll in the process. So, you know, in terms of calculating energy costs, maybe you know how to calculate energy costs, but you think it would be useful for somebody in accounting to better understand how to calculate energy savings from activities, or somebody in the maintenance group or somebody in operations. Think about who else in your organization you could send to some of these classes that really helps build awareness and knowledge and ability inside your organization. Good. And I think Beth is, again, typing in when these courses are being offered into the chat window below. So the next step in the Shewhart cycle is doing. And, you know, the categories that we've identified, or ISO 50001 has also identified in terms of the doing component, is, you know, outlining a training plan for your organization, outlining a communication plan and an employee engagement plan. So really, these first 3 bullets are all about getting more people involved in the process in your organization. So in terms of outlining a training plan, I've seen organizations actually enroll the HR department. Many organizations have somebody kind of in charge of training, and getting energy management embedded into that training process is a great way to kind of hardwire the process into the organization. Outlining a communication plan is important. You know, in terms of outlining a communication plan, one of the things that we do is actually identify target audiences, and then we outline what specific activities those target audiences can have on energy consumption. And then we outline a number of communication activities and communication vehicles to engage those people in the process. And the same process goes with employee engagement. So, you know, in the training workshops that we go through for these, we have kind of one-page communication plans and employee engagement plans that we end up with. Let's see. Somebody actually outlined that they wanted to talk a little bit about documentation for energy management. And I will say, you know, documentation for energy management is, when I look at this documentation piece, I tend to think about the formal process of documenting your activities, which is generally for organizations that have a little bit of experience implementing strategic energy management. They're a little further down the road, and now they're at the stage where they're establishing a significantly more structured management process. And the same thing with operational control and maintenance control. Now, I will say that making operational and maintenance improvements can occur even in the early stages of implementing strategic energy management. But really documenting those and then changing business practices are things that generally occur a little bit further down the road. And I'll give one specific example. Many organizations look at either standard operating procedures or work instructions that they have inside their organization. And they can go through standard operating procedures and actually think about the energy implications relative to those standard operating procedures. So if a standard operating procedure is for the maintenance department to come in at 5:30 in the morning and turn equipment on, the operators come in at 6 o'clock and start running product through the machines, then you know, looking at those operating procedures, one could say, all right, what equipment needs to be turned on when? Do we need to turn all the equipment on at 5:30? Or could we look at the production schedule for the day and only turn on the equipment that we need either for that day or for the first few hours? Could we delay turning some of the equipment on over time? And let's hardwire that process into our standard operating procedures and document that. The other item here is procurement. And procurement is one of those very critical elements of strategic energy management that most organizations don't think about until they are a year, 2 years, 3 years into the process. So, you know, the main thing about procurement that I would say is that it really helps to identify the equipment that you're currently purchasing. So you're purchasing light bulbs to replace on an as-needed basis. You know, many organizations will have motors kind of on the shelf in the event that one of the motors goes out. So are we purchasing energy efficient light bulbs? Are we purchasing premium efficient motors? Those are just a couple of examples. You know, other organizations are purchasing services, for example. So if you're purchasing if you're purchasing an HVAC maintenance service, one could go through that maintenance service contract and identify the energy management activities that might be included in an HVAC maintenance contract. So those are the elements for strategic energy management from a do perspective, if you will. I guess I'd like to just kind of stop there and ask if there are any questions with any of these categories. Feel free to raise your hand, click on that raise your hand button, and Beth will let you chat. You can also type into the chat box, and Beth will bring your question to the table as well. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to ask each of you, this is a way of sharing again, if you will. I'd like you to use your text tool in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, and just write a couple of words or phrases that identify how you are communicating with employees now. What are you doing to be successful? And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to strategic energy management, but how are you communicating with employees for safety or quality or, or other activities, health and safety? Yeah, newsletters are one way. People use SharePoint, or yep, company intranets. A number of organizations use safety boards. Sometimes they'll put an energy component on safety boards. One-on-one communication is great. We actually were working with an organization recently that they didn't really have meetings, they didn't have a strong communication network, and the energy manager actually took a list of all of the employees and went around to each employee and had a conversation with them about energy and checked their name off of the list. He just had a very methodical process of this kind of one-on-one, in-person activity, which I thought was really good. Yeah, Beth, I think we have a question.
Yeah, somebody shared in chat team meetings as a way to engage employees.
Yeah. Team meetings are a great way, and I guess the overall point that I would make with employee engagement and communication is don't recreate the wheel. And that's the whole point of this slide. Identify the way that you are currently communicating with employees and figure out a way to kind of wrap strategic energy management into it. You'll find that it's also another way to kind of engage other people in the process. So whoever's putting the newsletter together, you can kind of feed them information. Whoever's organizing the monthly team meetings, you can feed them information. Competitions are a great way to kind of get people involved as well. So I've seen organizations have competitions where maybe a work group gets some sort of an award, maybe an individual gets some sort of an award. One of the organizations that I worked with had a competition, and the award for the competition was that work group got to choose which kids sports team that the company was going to sponsor. The company sponsored a kids sports team every year, but whoever kind of won this energy management award, I think it was either the most ideas or the most energy saved from the ideas, that work group got to pick which kids sports team that they were going to sponsor. Yeah, show how the energy affects their pay. Another company that we worked with, actually there was a bunch of equipment that was left on all the time, and they wanted to kind of make the point that leaving that equipment on was costing the company money. So they went out and got a bunch of play money. They calculated how much each piece of equipment cost to leave on for whatever period of time over the course of the year, and they counted out that quantity of play money and left that play money by that piece of equipment. And then the next day they had an all-company meeting, and they said, hey, did anybody find play money around? And people thought, oh yeah, I found $200 next to, this piece of equipment. And they said, well, that's how much it costs when we leave that piece of equipment on through the course of the year. So it was a very visual and tactile way to actually demonstrate how much it costs to run that equipment. I see we do have, I told you that you'd get rewarded for making jokes. We have flogging. Yeah, so there are carrots and sticks, I guess, in terms of making people aware. I guess I prefer the carrots over the sticks, but, every culture is different. So, again, the point with employee engagement or communication is to use the processes that you already have in your organization. So with that, there are a number of classes that Portland General Electric offers that can kind of help you build awareness and knowledge inside your organization. And that's one way to kind of engage people and communicate with people, is to really help them better understand what the opportunities are in your organization. So here's a list of classes Portland General Electric offers. Of course, better lighting and lower costs workshop, introduction to efficient lighting, which is a webinar. It's becoming an LED world. LEDs have improved so much. I mean, that technology is advancing day by day. So LEDs, the opportunity for LEDs in most organizations is really spectacular. There are 2 workshops on HVAC systems. There's an intro workshop and then an advanced seminar. There's an introduction to solar thermal and photovoltaic systems webinar, and then a compressed air systems seminar and webinar. So again, think about who in your organization could benefit from some of these more technical classes that really helps kind of build that awareness, that technical ability, and kind of create a spark to improve energy management inside of your facility as a whole. And Beth is typing in when those classes are offered. I'll just let her kind of finish. That's all right. So yeah, it looks like May is a busy month for these classes, which is coming up. So I would encourage you to think about, who in your organization could benefit from these, and start to put a plan in place. And again, outlining kind of a training plan or a training matrix in your organization. One thing I've seen organizations do is, take the org chart for your organization. So think about the organizational chart for your organization, and then look at each box on the org chart and think about which one of these trainings fit into which box on your organizational chart. That's kind of a quick way to outline a quick and dirty training plan, if you will. Any questions about these trainings before we move off of them? Okay.
Mark, we did have a question about if folks will be sent a list of the trainings, and they will be. Within a couple days, we'll send the recording of the session, the slides, the additional materials that Mark mentioned, and a list of the classes and the dates. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Beth. So the next box or step in the Shewhart cycle, if you will, is checking. And checking is really all about monitoring, measuring, reporting, and then, if you have a more deliberate process, identifying what corrective actions you're taking to improve when you see anomalies or variances in your energy consumption. And Portland General Electric offers a number of tools and classes to help you monitor and measure. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a second. In terms of monitoring and measuring, we talked a little bit previously about establishing a baseline. And this is where kind of the planning process connects back to the checking process. So in theory, back in the planning process, we established a baseline. We pulled out all of our utility bills for the last 2 or 3 years. We created a graph to look at energy consumption month by month for each year. And now, as each bill comes in, we're overlaying that month's bill onto the graph of the last 2 or 3 months, or I'm sorry, 2 or 3 years of energy consumption, so that we can see, is this month's energy consumption higher or lower relative to this month of the last 2 or 3 years, so that you have some sort of a reference point. So if you're a small, basic commercial operation, you know, that's the approach you might want to take. If you're a large industrial facility, then monitoring might actually be done on a daily basis. Some organizations I know are actually reading their energy, their electricity meter on a daily basis, or they have an electronic system to kind of send them the consumption on a daily basis. And they are normalizing that consumption for weather, production, rainfall, what have you, on a regular basis. You know, reporting is probably, well, I hate to say that there's one most important thing here, because it is a system, and if you're not monitoring and measuring, then you can't report. But the point is that many organizations actually do the monitoring and measuring, but they don't really report the energy consumption out throughout the rest of the organization. And this kind of comes back to employee engagement, communication, et cetera. And so if we're not telling people how we're doing, then it's difficult to get them to actually take action when you want them to. And so, you know, having some sort of a reporting process, telling people how you're doing relative to energy consumption is really important in terms of engaging them, giving them the information to say, hey, we're doing really well and we should celebrate our success, or it looks like our energy consumption is going up and we'd like to get ideas or activities to bring our consumption down. But it really starts with reporting. It's letting people know how you're doing. This term audit really has kind of a couple of different meanings, very different meanings. There can be technical audits, but then there can be management audits of your energy management system. And in ISO 50001 terms, this audit term really means auditing your overall energy management system, which would mean coming back to look at how you're doing your planning process, what kind of employee engagement process you have, what kind of documentation you have for employee engagement, what kind of documentation you have for procurement, et cetera, et cetera. And then last but not least are corrective actions. So in the most formal sense, corrective actions need to be documented when your energy consumption falls out of range. In the less formal sense, the real question is, when you are monitoring and you do see that energy consumption is out of variance, what are you going to do? So when energy consumption goes up, what is your process to investigate why energy consumption has gone up, and who do you communicate with? And I will say that very few organizations that I've worked with have a formal or even informal process for corrective actions. And if there's kind of maybe not one thing you want to take away from here, but one of the things you want to take away from here is that it would really help to know what kind of action you take when you see energy consumption going up. So with that, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about monitoring and measuring. And, as I said a minute ago, your process for monitoring and measuring really depends on what size of an organization you are and, what variables drive your energy consumption. So what I'd like you to do is use your text tool in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, and I'd like you to just put kind of a check in the box that represents your organization best. So if you are looking at your energy consumption on a monthly basis, and you're only looking at one utility, you're only looking at electricity, or you're only looking at natural gas, then you would click in this lower left-hand box. If you are looking at energy consumption daily, and you are adjusting your consumption for weather or other variables, then you would put a check in the third column and maybe the first or second row. Beth?
Hi, I just want to let people know, it might, instead of using your text tool, you're welcome to use that. Next to the text tool, you'll see a square. If you use the drop-down tool, you can select a check mark, and then when you click anywhere, that check mark will appear.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, so we have quite a variety. Just in the 3 people that have checked here, we've got somebody that's looking at multiple utilities on a monthly basis. Another person that's adjusting for weather on a monthly basis, which is common in commercial facilities. We've got a number of other, 2 other participants that are looking at, we've got more that are looking at energy on a daily basis, which is great. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at energy consumption on a daily basis, you are actively tracking it. And, if you're a large organization, that makes sense. Yeah, here's somebody who's looking at energy consumption on a weekly basis. You can kind of see the variety of approaches that we have just on this call alone. And I think the main point that I'm trying to make here is that the complexity of your measurement and monitoring process really needs to be tailored to your organization. And we have a wide range of organization types on the call here today. If anybody wants to ask a question about how they are tracking energy consumption, I'm more than happy to kind of open up the discussion and try and answer your question. You would click on the raise your hand box right there. Okay. No, I really appreciate everybody participating in this exercise. Again, it does give an idea about the range of participants we have. Beth?
It looks like somebody under other variables typed in portfolio manager.
Yes.
I wanted to draw your attention to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So what are some tools that Portland General Electric offers to help you monitor and measure energy consumption? So Portland General Electric offers Energy Expert and Energy Tracker, and we're going to provide some information to you for both of those tools in the email that Beth will send out to everybody after this webinar. But the point here is that Energy Expert in particular can help you develop a daily scorecard. If your energy consumption exceeds certain thresholds out during that daily scorecard, it can send you a text or an email. Energy Expert can help you put together a series of kind of daily profiles. You can see this middle box right here has a month of daily profiles. And so you can start to look at how does one Monday compare to the next Monday? How does one Tuesday compare to the next Tuesday? How does Monday compare to Friday? How does Saturday compare to Sunday? Do you start to see some patterns that look like look like you're exceeding what you should be consuming during a particular time of day, or is there a particular time of day that you think there might be opportunity to reduce energy consumption? The typical example here is looking at off-hour energy consumption compared to, on-hour energy consumption, or, another way to put that is, the business hours compared to the non-business hours for the building. Or, do you see that that energy consumption is higher during one part of the month or another part of the month, during a holiday, etc. So you can really put these pretty sophisticated load profiles together that begin to identify where opportunities might be in your organization. I'm curious if anybody on the call right now is using Energy Expert and would like to tell us how you're using it. You can click on the Raise Your Hand button. Okay. Some of the courses that PGE offers with regard to the check category is Discovering the Power of Energy Monitoring, a hands-on workshop. So this workshop actually covers the full range of energy monitoring. It gives kind of a quick overview of tools like Energy Expert and Energy Tracker, but it also addresses short-term monitoring and how you can implement, or how you can use short-term monitoring tools to monitor the use of specific pieces of equipment in your facility, so that you can really understand how you can drill down and better understand where energy is being used in your facility, and what you might be able to do to control that energy use by piece of equipment. So it is a hands-on workshop. There's actually a couple pieces of equipment that you end up monitoring during the workshop, and then doing some analysis during the workshop on those pieces of equipment. So it's a pretty fun workshop, very engaging. And of course, we've talked a little bit about Energy Expert. Energy Tracker is primarily for residential and very small commercial buildings. And again, we will be sending out some additional information on those two tools. If you are not using one of those two tools, I'd strongly recommend that you do. Okay, so the next step in the Short cycle is the ACT cycle. And this includes the management review, the technical review, recognizing and rewarding employees, and then updating the plan. And when we started the webinar, we talked a little bit about management commitment. One of the things I said is that having an executive sponsor is absolutely critical, and that I recommended setting up kind of a 6-month and a 12-month meeting with your executive sponsor. And this management review would be considered to be that 12-month meeting with your executive sponsor. And really the point of the management review is to identify how the organization is doing. This is not a technical assessment, but it's really an organizational assessment. So, who's been involved in helping reduce energy costs through your organization? Who do you need to get more involved in reducing energy costs through your organization? Do you have the right information? Are you giving the right people the right information? This is a time to kind of take a step back and really look at the overall process for strategic energy management as opposed to the technical opportunities. The technical review is really thinking about the technical opportunities. And one of the things I recommend for all organizations is that they maintain an opportunity register. They've got a list of activities and opportunities that they can implement to help reduce energy consumption. And some of those activities you'll be working on, some of those activities, might be pie in the sky ideas. Some of those activities might be things that you're going to think about next quarter or next year. But the point is, you've got a laundry list of activities, and you're continually renewing that laundry list of activities. And so once a year, it helps to kind of say, okay, where are we with our opportunity register? How are we managing our opportunity register? Who's got which projects? Again, the way to success here is to kind of delegate and get the broader organization involved. Can you kind of hand some of these opportunities off to other departments? Taking a step back and looking at the overall management process in conjunction with the technical opportunities is critical in continuous improvement and strategic energy management. And then recognizing and rewarding employees. I know that when we had you all identify employee engagement ideas, somebody mentioned flogging. I think we want to stay away from that, but really showing people success and recognizing what people are doing. And I will say that as I've gone out and worked with quite a number of organizations, the number one thing that people appreciate most is a public recognition. We all think, oh, we have to kind of pay people. But the reality is, people respond to just being thanked publicly. It's a huge thing. And the other thing that I've learned working with a number of organizations is that, most operators, maintenance people, and I think this is true of the population in general, most people take significant pride in their work. And if they can actually improve the organization by reducing energy costs, you can appeal to kind of the sense of pride of doing the right thing and recognizing them for that. And then last but not least is updating the plan. Out of the management review and the technical review should come some improvements for the next year. And we want to think about what those improvements are and build them into the plan. We talked about the Energy Star Energy Management Assessment Matrix that Beth is going to send out to everybody. So if you use that matrix to kind of help establish your first plan, I actually recommend bringing that matrix back in your management review and maybe even using that matrix in your management review to help you facilitate the discussion with senior management and then identify specific actions to help update the plan overall. So are there any questions before I move off of the ACT component of the short cycle? Any thoughts, questions? Okay. So some classes that Portland General Electric offers related to the ACT cycle, if you will. Electrical safety. Beth opened this webinar with kind of a safety moment. Portland General Electric takes safety very important, and actually so do we. And I'd encourage anybody that's working with electricity or even, frankly, working around or with people that are working with electricity to have some sort of an electrical safety awareness. And PGE offers this seminar. We talked a little bit about a CFO's perspective on energy efficiency and renewables in the management commitment section. I also said that you'll notice there's some overlap between these components of the short cycle. And if you were not able to get your senior management to attend this workshop at the beginning of your process, perhaps you can talk them into it at the end of the first year of your process, for example. So, this is one of the best kind of management seminars that I've seen around. And then again, you know, the Energy Champions Workshop and the Employee Engagement Workshop are great workshops to kind of come back a year into your plan and help you kind of revisit what should I be doing to improve, and who can I talk to that is out there that I might be able to bounce some ideas off or get different ideas. And I will tell you that both the Energy Champions and the Employee Engagement Workshops do a great job of getting the participants to share ideas with each other. And those are some of the objectives of those workshops. Are there any questions about the classes related to this component of the short cycle? Good. So, you know, we're at the end of the workshop. We started the workshop by going over this worksheet, and hopefully you were able to identify a handful of items through the webinar and you know, have at least some idea about, you know, what are a couple of things that you're going to do after this webinar. You know, I think the true test of the value of the webinar is what action items you have coming out of it. I'm just curious if anybody wants to kind of raise their hand and share what they're thinking with regard to strategic energy management now compared to when we started the webinar. You can click on raise your hand. Okay. With that, Beth, I think if there are any other thoughts or questions. Oh, did we see Kristen raise her hand? No? Yeah, Kristen?
Hi, Kristen. Would you like to ask a question? You can go ahead.
Sure. Do I type it or do it out loud?
You can speak out loud. Everyone can hear you now.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Thank you. No, I just, as far as something that I see as key after attending the webinar is communication and just being in touch with your employees. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that very much. Kristen, what kind of organization are you in?
PG.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we appreciate you participating today. And I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, there's a saying in continuous improvement that, you know, with regard to safety, safety isn't one person's job, it's everybody's job. And the same thing is true for energy management. Energy management is not one person's job, it's everybody's job. So with that, I think, Beth, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Excuse me. I just want to remind everyone that our webinars are sponsored by the Energy Trust of Oregon and the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. And PGE and the Energy Trust provide free energy efficiency consultations to assist businesses in identifying savings opportunities. And if you're interested in learning more, you can either visit the website at portlandgeneral.com/business, and there'll be a form to fill out, or go ahead and give these folks a call. If you're a commercial customer, you can call Paula Conway. The phone number is listed there, and the email. Or if you're an industrial customer, you can contact Darren Spencer, and this information will be sent to you with the slides of the seminar. And now I'd like to proceed to the question and answer portion of the webinar, but before I do that, I'd like to remind everyone that you can continue to submit questions to me through chat, and I'll ask them of Mark. And I'd like to real quickly draw your attention to a feedback survey, which I've opened here in the bottom lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you can take a few minutes to fill that out, we really value your feedback and do use it to improve future webinars. And now with my first question I have here from an audience member is, one second. Mark, could you speak more to the opportunity register you spoke about under the technical review section? How would you factor in, or can you factor in O&M opportunities into that register?
Yeah, that's a great question, Beth, and I would say that the opportunity register really should capture all opportunities. And in fact, I recommend that organizations have not only the technical opportunities, but what are the employee engagement activities that are being implemented? And those are outlined on the opportunity register as well. So with regard to operations and maintenance opportunities specifically, those can go on the opportunity register. They may not have any external costs associated with them, and it may actually be relatively difficult to outline the specific savings for each of those operations and maintenance activities. But by listing all of the operations and maintenance activities, one of the things that an organization can do is use the opportunity register as a way to prioritize those different operations and maintenance activities. Very often, organizations we work with have more opportunities than they can implement at any one time. And so part of the success is keeping from getting overwhelmed, if you will, and having a structured process to prioritize. And the opportunity register can kind of help you do that. And prioritization can just be, how easy is it to implement? How much savings do we think we can get, high, medium, and low? So if it's easy to implement and you think there's high savings, you want to do those opportunities first. If you think it's hard to implement and it's low volume of savings, then obviously those opportunities fall lower on the opportunity register.
Thanks, Mark. And I just have one more question here, so if folks would like to ask additional questions, please let me know. But the last question we have is, you mentioned on slide 20, I believe, under how are you tracking your energy, a question about whether, or you asked if people were weather adjusted. How would you adjust for weather when you're tracking your energy?
Sure. So energy consumption can vary inside facilities based on how warm it is or how cold it is. So if a facility, large commercial buildings, for example, tend to have significant heat gain inside the building and generally need to do air conditioning even in the winter. Other buildings need are more heating dominated, if you will. And so one way to normalize for weather is to use either heating degree days or cooling degree days to help kind of normalize mathematically. And I don't have time to kind of get into the math of how to do that right now, but suffice it to say that looking at either heating degree days or cooling degree days can really help normalize your energy consumption. And I believe, well, I know that Energy Expert can help you do that. And I believe that PGE has a couple of classes that address that topic as well. So if you want to know more about that, I would contact your PGE representative.